Hello, and welcome to this episode of Kescast, and happy National Poetry Day. I thought in honour of this yearly event I would pick a favourite poem of mine, and this year's theme is truth, and I feel that this poem fits that theme. There's certainly lots that's true about it. The title of the poem is When You Are Old, and I suppose old age is something that awaits all of us, so there's a kind of truth to that. I'm going to read the poem to you and then just tell you a little bit about why I picked it and why it's a special poem to me. So this is When You Are Old by WB Yeats. When you are old and grey and full of sleep and nodding by the fire, take down this book and slowly read and dream of the soft look your eyes had once and of their shadows deep. How many loved your moments of glad grace, and loved your beauty with love false or true. But one man loved the pilgrim soul in you, and loved the sorrows of your changing face. And bending down beside the glowing bars, murmur, a little sadly, how love fled, and paced upon the mountains overhead, and hid his face amid a crowd of stars. So I still remember the first time I read this poem, and it was an experience that I think showed me just how powerful a simple poem can be, and the fact that in a very short space you can capture strong emotions. It was a gateway for me to lots of other poems. Perhaps I'll start by just talking a little bit about what I think the poem is saying. We seem to be listening to the voice of a man, a young lover who is sort of addressing his beloved, but asking her to imagine her old age. And we get quite a specific picture of her as an old woman around a sort of cosy fire. She's sort of in a sort of drowsy state. Rather commandingly, he tells her to get up and take down this book. The implication being that he will be a successful poet whose poems will appear in books, and read this poem again. So although he's addressing a young woman, he's asking her to imagine herself in old age. And that's just one of the ways in which the poem sort of exerts a power over its reader. Because of Yeats's use of the second person, we become that woman. That is perhaps why the poem has such an impact on its reader. The poem also shifts time. We start in the future, when you are old. But then he asks this old woman to think back on her past, her youth. How many loved your moments of glad grace? There's an implication that she was something of a beauty in her youth, but that some of her suitors, her lovers, were more sincere than others. There was one guy who really loved her, and didn't just love her beauty or her sort of her exterior, her appearance. He loved something deeper within her, the pilgrim soul in you. That word pilgrim suggests this idea of, your body may age, but your soul travels through time. Your soul is something that stays kind of constant. It might also have echoes of Shakespeare's depiction of the first meeting of Romeo and Juliet, and the kind of purity of their young love. This man loved not just her soul, but also the sorrows of your changing face. I think that the use of sorrows is interesting because it reminds me that there is kind of a sadness to this poem. Its rhythm is quite slow. The word I'd use is plangent. It's sort of mournful. it kind of makes the reader, sad and reflective just through its very rhythm. It kind of hypnotises, I think, as we're reading it. And then in its final verse, I think is the poem's sort of real sting in the tale, where he again snatches away this young girl's youth and turns her back into an old woman who's bending down beside the glowing bars. These are the bars of her fire, which are perhaps red hot, but there's also something quite imprisoning about those bars. She's trapped in this homely setting. And what's she doing? She's murmuring a little sadly, how love fled. Now, my impression is that Yeats was spurned by this woman, and this poem is sort of like his revenge, and he's saying, you may not realise it now, but one day you will realise just what a good thing you gave up. So there is a sort of bitterness to the poem, but that's balanced with with some of the beauty of its imagery, and I think that comes in the final two lines where Yeats says, well, where's love gone? It's paced upon the mountains overhead and hid his face amid a crowd of stars. Unlike the old woman who's trapped by the bars of her fire, love is roaming free and experiencing unlimited opportunity. I get the sense of Yeats, the poet, saying, I'm going to kind of go and have this kind of glittering career, and there'll be a part of you that wishes that you'd kind of come with me. And so there is a sort of slightly vindictive tone to it. So then I wonder about what does it say about me that I've picked this as one of my favourite poems. I just think it's so powerful, and the way it plays with time, what it does to us as readers as we're listening. It's one of the saddest, simplest love poems I've ever read that really captures the pain of unrequited love. And that's how we feel when we read it. My assumption is that Yeats was talking about a real woman, and we can only assume that she must have read the poem. So how on earth must she have felt upon reading this poem from a man who clearly loved her more than she could possibly imagine. So that's When You Are Old by WB Yeats. That's my choice to celebrate National Poetry Day. So thank you. Thanks for listening.